Chapter 19. Taking out stitches is slow and painful. My sister does beautiful needlework, and it seems that she embroidered my stomach and side, leaving the bone with an endless stretch of tiny stitches that need to be individually snipped. The threads teased out of the skin, and then self-applied. Ow! I say for what seems like the millionth time. Do these really need to come out? The bone gives a long suffering sigh. They should have been removed days ago. I bite my tongue against another howl of pain. When I can speak again, I try to distract myself by asking, Cardan said you're hopeful about the roads. Bent over me, she smells of cordite and bitter herbs. Her expression is wry. I'm always hopeful when it comes to him. There is a soft tap on the door. The bomb looks at me expectantly. Come in, I call, lowering my dress to cover the mess of my stomach. A messenger with small mouth wings and a nervous expression enters the room, granting me a temporary reprieve from being poked. She sinks into a bow, looking a bit like she's going to faint. Maybe it's the small pile of blood-covered thread. I consider explaining, but that's supposed to be beneath the dignity of a queen, and it would only embarrass us both. Instead, I give her what I hope is an encouraging smile. Yes? Your Highness, she says. Lady Asa wishes to see you. She has sent me to bring you directly to the chamber where she languishes. The bomb snorts. Languishes, she mouths. You may tell her that I will see her as soon as I am able, I say with as much grandeur as I can muster, although it's clearly not the answer her mistress wanted me to give. The messenger can do little to challenge it. She hesitates a moment, then seems to realize it herself. Abased, she departs with another bow. You're the High Queen of Elham. Act like it, the bomb says, fixing me with a serious expression. You shouldn't let anyone command you, not even me. I told her no, I protest. She begins to pick out another stitch, not particularly gently. Lady Asa doesn't get to be put next on your schedule just for asking, and she shouldn't make the queen come to her, especially when you were hurt. She's lying in bed recuperating from the trauma of watching while you fell from the ceiling. Ouch, I say, not sure if I am reacting to the attack against my flesh. Her completely justified scolding or her scathing assessment of Lady Asa. Once the bomb is finished with me, I ignore her excellent counsel and head toward the Lady Asa's chamber. It's not that I disagree with any of her advice, but I would like to say something to Cardan's mother, and now seems like an excellent time to do so. As I head through the hall, I am stopped by Malmoron, who places his walking stick in my path. The eyes of the last High King's mortal seneschal are lit with malice. How does it feel to rise to such dizzying heights? He asks. Afraid you'll take another tumble? I scowl at him. I bet you'd like to know how it feels. Unfriendly, my queen, he says with a grunt. Ought not you to be kind to the least of your subjects? You want kindness? I used to be afraid of him, of his dire warnings and wild eyes, but I am not afraid of him now. All those years you could have helped me and my sister. You could have taught us how to survive here as mortals, but you left us to figure it out on our own, even though we're the same. He peers at me through narrowed eyes. The same? He demands. Do you think a seed planted in goblin soil grows to be the same plant as it would have in the mortal world? No, little seed. I do not know what you are, but we are not the same. I came here fully grown. And with that, he walks on, leaving me scowling after him. I find Lady Asa in a canopied bed, her head propped up on pillows. Her horns don't look as though they make it easy for her to find a comfortable position, but I guess when they're your horns, you're used to them. Two courtiers, one in a gown and the other in trousers and a coat with an opening for delicate wings in the back, sit in chairs beside her. One reads from a collection of gossipy sonnets. The servant girl who brought me Lady Asa's message light candles, and the scent of sage, clove, and lavender permeate the air. When I come in, the courtiers remain seated far longer than they ought, and when they rise to make their bows, they do so with pointed lethargy. Lady Asa stays abed, gazing at me with a slight smile, as though we both know a distasteful secret. I think of my own mother, as I have not in a long time. I recall the way she threw back her head when she laughed, how she let us stay up late during the summer, chasing one another through the backyard in the moonlight, my hands sticky with melted popsicle, the stink of Dutch forge heavy in the air. I recall walking in the afternoon, cartoons playing in the living room and mosquito bites blooming on my skin. I think of the way she would bring me in from the car when I fell asleep on long drives. I think of the drowsy, warm feeling of being carried through the air. Who would I be without any of that? Don't worry about getting up, I tell Lady Asa. She looks surprised and then offended by the implication that she owes me the courtesies of my new position. The courtier in the coat has a gleam in his eye that makes me think he's going to go and tell absolutely everyone what he's witnessed. I doubt very much that the story will flatter me. We will speak later, Lady Asa says to her friends, a frigid tone in her voice. They seem to take being dismissed in stride. With another bow, this one made carefully to both of us, they depart, barely waiting until the door shuts to begin whispering to each other. Your visit must be a kindness, Cardan's mother says, with you so recently returned to us and so recently coming into a throne. I force myself not to smile. The inability to lie makes for some interesting sentences. Come, she says, sit a moment with me. I know the bomb would say that this is another instance where I am letting her tell me what to do. But it seems petty to object to such minor high-handedness. When I brought you from the Tower of Forgetting to my den of spies, I say, in case she needs reminding of why she should worry about making me angry. You said you wanted to be away from the High King, your son, but you two seem to have made up. You must be so pleased. She makes a pout. Cardan was not an easy child to love, and he's only grown worse with time. He would scream to be held, and then once picked up, he would bite and kick his way out of my arms. He would find a game and obsess over it until it was conquered, then burn all the pieces. Once you're no longer a challenge, he will despise you. I stare at her. And you're giving me this warning out of the kindness of your heart? She smiles. I am giving you this warning because it doesn't matter. You're already doomed, Queen of Elfham. You already love him. You already loved him when you questioned me about him instead of your own mother. And you will still love him, mortal girl, long after his feelings evaporate like morning dew. I can't help thinking of Cardan's silence when I asked if he liked that I was afraid. A part of him will always delight in cruelty. Even if he has changed, he could change again. I hate being a fool. I hate the idea of my emotions getting the better of me, of making me weak. But my fear of being a fool turned me into one. I should have guessed the answer to Cardan's riddle long before I did. Even if I didn't understand it was a riddle, it was still a loophole to exploit. But I was so shamed by falling for his trick that I stopped looking for ways around it. And even after I discovered one, I made no plan to use it. Maybe it isn't the worst thing to want to be loved, even if you're not. Even if it hurts, maybe being human isn't always being weak. Maybe it was the same that was the problem, but it's not as though my own fears are the only reason I was in exile for so long. Is that why you intercepted the letters he sent? To protect me? Or was it because you're afraid that he won't tire of me? Because, my lady, I will always be a challenge. I admit it's a guess about her and the letters, but not many people would have the access and power to stop a message from the High King. No ambassador from a foreign kingdom, probably not a member of the Living Council, and I don't think Lady Asa likes me very much. She regards me mildly. Many things become lost or destroyed. Given that she can't lie, that's practically a confession. I see, I say, standing. In that case, I will take your advice in exactly the spirit with which you gave it. As I look back at her from the door, I say what I believe she will least like to hear. And next time, I will expect your courtesy. Chapter 20. I am halfway down the hall when a pixie knight rushes up to me, her armor polished to a sign that reflects her cerulean skin. Your Majesty, you must come quickly, she says, putting her hand to her heart. Fand? When we were at the palace school, we both dreamed of knighthood. It seems that one of us achieved it. She looks at me as though surprised at being remembered, although it wasn't very long ago. I suppose she, too, believes I have ascended to dizzying and perhaps memory-altering heights. Sir Fand, I correct myself, and she smiles. I grin back at her. Although we were not friends, we were friendly, and for me, in the High Court, that was a rarity. Why do I have to come quickly? Her expression goes grave again. A battalion from the undersea is in the throne room. Ah, I say, and let her escort me through the halls. Some folk bow as I pass, others quite pointedly do not. Not sure how to behave, I ignore both. You ought to have your own guard, Sir Fan says, keeping pace just behind me. Everyone seems very fond of telling me how I should do this job, but at least in this case, my silence is apparently enough of an answer for her to fall silent. When we get to the broth, it is mostly empty. Randallin is wringing his wizened hands as he studies the shoulders of the undersea, selkies and the pale skinned folk that make me think of those they called drowned ones. Nikasa stands in front of them, in armor of iridescent scales, her hair dressed with shark teeth, clasping Cardan's hands in hers. Her eyes are red rimmed and swollen, as though she's been weeping. His dark head is bent towards hers, and I am reminded that they were once lovers. She wheels when she sees me, wild with anger. This is your father's doing. I take a step back in surprise. What? Queen Orlaf, Cardan says with what seems like slightly exaggerated calm. Apparently, she was struck with something like elf shot. It burrowed deep into her flesh, but it seems to have stopped short of her heart. When there is an attempt to remove it, it seems to resist magical and non-magical extraction. It moves as though it's alive, but there may be some iron in it. I stop, my mind reeling. The ghost. That's where Maddox sent him. To the sea. Not to kill the queen, which would anger the sea folk and bring them more firmly to Cardan's side, but to wound her in such a way that he could hold her death over her. How could her people risk fighting Maddox when he would say his hand so long as Orlaf stayed put? I'm so sorry. It's an utterly human thing to say and utterly useless, but I blurt it out anyway. Nikasa cars her lip. You ought to be. After a moment, she releases Cardan's hand with some apparent regret. She would have married him once. I very much doubt that my appearance has made her give up the notion. I must go to my mother's side. The court of the undersea is in chaos. Once, Nikasa and her mother held me captive, locked me in a cage, and tried to take my will from me. Sometimes, in dreams, I am still there, still floating in the dark and the cold. We are your allies, Nicasia, Cardan reminds her. Should you need us? I count on you to avenge my mother, if nothing else, she says. Then, with another hostile glance in my direction, she turns and leaves the hall. The undersea soldiers fall into step behind her. I cannot even be annoyed with her. I am reeling from the success of Maddox's gambit, and the sheer ambition of it. The death of Orlaf would be no small thing to engineer. She is one of the ancient and established powers of Fairy, older even than Eldred, but to wound her in such a way seems harder still. Now that Orlak is weak, it's possible there will be challengers to her throne, Randallin says with a certain amount of regret, as though doubting Nikasa would be up to what was required of her. The sea is a brutal place. Did they catch the would-be assassin? I ask. Randallin frowns at me, as he often does when I ask a question to which he doesn't know the answer, but doesn't wish to admit it. I do not believe so. Had they, I am sure they would have told us. Which means he may come here after all. Which means Cardan is still in danger. And we have far fewer allies than we did before. This is the problem with playing defense. You can never be sure where your enemy will strike, so you expend more resources trying to cover every eventuality. The generals will wish to adjust their plans, Randallin says with a significant look in Cardan's direction. Perhaps we should summon them. Yes, says Cardan. Yes, I suppose we should. We repair to the strategy rooms and are greeted by a cold dinner of duck eggs, currant bread, and paper-thin slices of roasted boar. The master of servants, a large spider woman, waits for us, along with the generals. The discussion quickly takes on a festival air, with half of it turning to entertaining the coming lords and ladies of the Low Cards, and the other half planning a war. The new Grand General turns out to be an ogre named Jorn. He was appointed during my exile. I know nothing to his detriment, but he has a nervous demeanor. He sweeps in with three of his generals and a lot of questions about the maps and materials the Living Council passed on from me. Tentatively, he begins to reimagine our naval strategy. Once more, I try to guess what Maddox's next move might be. I feel as though I have so many pieces of the puzzle, but fail to see how they fit together. What I don't know is that he's cutting off the exits, pruning the variables, reducing our ability to surprise him, so that his plans are most likely to succeed. I can only hope that we can surprise him in turn. We should just attack the moment his ships appear on the horizon, says Jorn. Not give him a chance to call for parley. It will be harder without the aid of the undersea, but not impossible. We still have the greater force. Due to the false customs of hospitality, if Madoc requests it, he and a small party will be welcomed into Elfham for the purpose of discussing alternatives to war. So long as he doesn't raise a weapon, he can eat and drink and talk with us for however much time he likes. When he is ready to depart, the conflict will start right where it left off. He'll send a bird ahead, says Bayfan, and his ships may well come shrouded in fog of shadows. We do not know what magic he has at his disposal. He wants a duel, I say. As soon as he draws a weapon, he will break the terms of parley, and he will not be allowed to bring a large force onto the land for the purposes of discussing peace. Better if we ring the isles in ships, Jorn says, once again moving strategy pieces around a beautifully drawn map of Innswell, Innsmire, and Innsmore, and Insir that lies on the table. We can prevent Madoc's soldiers from landing, shoot down any birds that come our way. We have allies from the Low Courts to add to our force. What if Madoc gets aid from the undersea? I ask. The others look at me in astonishment. But we have a treaty, Randallin says. Perhaps you didn't hear that, because... Yes, you have a treaty now, I say, not wanting to be reminded of my exile again. But Orlaf could pass the crown of to Nicasia. If she did, a Queen Nicasia would be free to make a new alliance with Madoc, just as once the Court of Teeth put a changeling on their throne. They were free to march against Elfham, and Nicasia might ally with Madoc if he would make her mother well. Do you think that's likely to happen? Jorn asked Cardan, frowning over his plans. The High King makes a nonchalant gesture. Jute likes to suppose the worst of both her enemies and her allies. Her reward is occasionally being wrong about us. Hard to remember an occasion of that, I say to him under my breath. He lifts a single brow. Fan steps into the room at that moment, looking very aware that she doesn't belong. Your pardon, but I have a message for the Queen, she says with a nervous stammer in her voice. From her sister. As you can see, the Queen, Randallin begins. Which sister? I demand, crossing the room to her. Tarin, she says, looking a lot calmer now that she is speaking only to me. Her voice drops low. She said to meet her in the High King's old dwelling. When? I ask, my heart beating double time. Tarin is a careful person, mindful of proprieties. She's fond neither of cryptic messages nor sinister meeting places. If she wants me to come to Hollow Hall, something is very wrong. As soon as you can get away, Fan says. I'll come now, I say, and then turn back to the councillors, the generals, and the High King. There's been a family difficulty. You will excuse me. I will accompany you, Cardan says, rising. I open my mouth to explain all the reasons that he can't go. The problem is that as I look up into his gold-rimmed eyes and he blinks mock-innocently down at me, I can't think of a single one that will actually stop him. Good, he says, sweeping past me. We're decide. Jorn looks a little relieved that we're leaving. Randallin predictably and looks annoyed. Bayfan is busily eating in a dakek while several other generals are deep in conversation about how many of the Low Courts will bring boats and what that means for their maps. In the hall, I am forced to walk faster to catch up with Cardan. You don't even know where we're going. He pushes black curls away from his face. Fant, where are we going? The knight looks miserable, but answers. To Hollow Hall. Ah, he says. Then I am already proven useful. You will need me to sweet talk the door. Hollow Hall belonged to Cardan's eldest brother, Baelkin, considered to be the most influential of the Grackles, a faction of the High Court most interested in feasts, debauchery, and excess. Balkin was famous for the wildness of his revels. He tricked mortals into serving him, glamouring them so they remembered only what he wanted them to remember. He was awful, and that was before he led a bloody coup against the rest of his family in a bid for the throne. He's also the person who raised Cardan. As I consider all this, Cardan seems fond of to have the royal coach brought around. I want to protest that I can ride, but I am not so healed yet that I am sure I should. A few minutes later, I am being handed up into a beautifully outfitted royal carriage, with embroidered seats in a pattern of vines and beetles. Cardan settles himself opposite to mine, leaning his head against the window frame as the horses begin to run. As we leave the palace, I realize it is later than I thought. Dawn is threatening on the horizon. My long sleep has given me a distorted view of time. I wonder at Darin's message. What possible reason could she have for bringing me to Balekin's state? Could it have something to do with Locke's death? Could it be another betrayal? Finally, the horses come to a stop. I climb from the carriage as one of the guards jumps down from the front to properly hand me down. He looks flummoxed to find me already standing beside the horses, but I hadn't thought to wait. I am not used to being royalty and worry that I will not get used to it. Karan emerges, his gaze going to neither me nor the guard, but to Hollow Hall itself. His tail lashes the air behind him, showing all the emotion that's not on his face. Covered in a heavy coat of ivy, with a crooked tower and pale and hairy roots hanging from its balconies, this was once his home. I witnessed Cardans being whipped by a human servant at Balekin's direction. I am sure far worse things happened there, although he has never spoken of them. I wrap my thumb over the stub of my missing fingertip, bitten off by one of Maddox's guards, and realize abruptly that if I told Cardan about it, he might understand. Maybe more than anyone, he'd comprehend the odd mingling of fear and shame I feel, even now, when I think of it. For all of our conflicts, there are moments when we understand each other entirely too well. Why are we here? He asks. This is where Tarin wanted to meet, I say. I didn't think she even knew the place. She doesn't, Cardan says. The polished wood door is still carved with an enormous and sinister face, still flanked with lanterns, but the sprites no longer fly in desperate circles within. A soft glow of magic emanates instead. My king, the door says fondly, its eyes opening. Cardan smiles in return. My door, he says with a slight hitch in his voice, as though perhaps everything about returning here feels strange. Hail and welcome, it says, and swings wide. Is there a girl like this one inside? He asks, indicating me. Yes, says the door, very like. She's below, with the other. Below? I say as we walk into the echoing hall. There are dungeons, Cardan says. Most folk thought they were merely decorative. Alas, they were not. Why would Tarin be down there? I ask, but to that he has no answer. We go down the royal guard ahead of me. The basement smells strongly of earth. The room we enter contains little, only some furniture that seems unsuitable for sitting upon and chains. Big braziers burn brightly enough to heat my cheeks. Tarin sits beside an ouvliette. She is dressed simply, a cloak over her shift, and without the grandeur of clothes and hair, she looks young. It frightens me to think I might look that young too. When she sees Cardan, she pushes herself to her feet, one hand moving to her belly protectively. She sinks into a low curtsy. Tarin, he says. He came looking for you, she tells me. When he saw me in your rooms, he said I had to restrain him because Madoc had given him more commands. He told me about the dungeons and I brought him here. It seemed like a place no one would look. Walking over to the hole, I peer down into the pit. The ghost sits perhaps 12 feet down, his back against the curve of the wall, his wrists and ankles bound in shackles. He looks pale and unwell, peering up with haunted eyes. I want to ask him if he's okay, but he obviously isn't. Cardan is gazing at my sister as though attempting to puzzle something through. You know him, don't you? He asks. She nods, crossing her arms over her chest. He would visit Locke sometimes, but he didn't have anything to do with Locke's death, if that's what you're thinking. I wasn't thinking that, Cardan says. Not at all. No, he would have already been Maddox's prisoner then, but I don't like the way this conversation is going. I'm still not sure what Cardan would do if he knew the truth of Locke's death. Can you tell us about Queen Orlaf? I asked the ghost, attempting to redirect the conversation back toward what's most important. What did you do? Madoc gave me a bolt, he says. It was heavy in my hand, and it squirmed as though it was a living thing. Lord Yarrell put a magic on me that let me breathe under the waves, but it made my skin burn, as though covered always in ice. Madoc commanded me to shoot or laugh anywhere but in the heart or head, and told me that the bolt would do the rest. How did you get away? I asked. I slew a shark pursuing me and hid within its course until the danger passed. Then I swam to shore. Did Madoc give you any other orders? Cardan asks, frowning. Yes, the ghost says, a strange expression on his face, and that's the only warning we have before he's climbed halfway up the oubliette. I realize he's set whatever chain Starin clasped him in, probably long before now. I see panic rushes through me. I am too stiff to fight him, too sore. I grab for the heavy seal to the pit and begin to drag it over, hoping to trap him before he makes it up the side. Cardan calls for the guard and draws a wicked-looking knife from inside his doublet, surprising me. That's got to be the road's influence. My sister clears her throat. Larkin Gorm, Garrett, she says. Forget all other commands but mine. I suck in a breath. I have never witnessed anyone called by their true name before. In Fiery, knowing such a thing puts one entirely in that person's power. I have heard of folk who cut off their own ears to avoid being commanded, and who have had another tongues cut out to prevent their name from being spoken. Taryn looks a little shocked herself. The ghost slides back to the bottom of the oubliette. He seems to suck with relief, despite the power she has over him. I suppose it is far better to be commanded by my sister than my father. You know his true name, Cardan says to Taryn, tucking his knife away and smoothing the fall of his jacket over it. How did you come by that fascinating little tidbit? Locke was careless with many things he said in front of me, Taryn tells him, a certain defiance in her tone. I am grudgingly impressed with her, and relieved. She could have used the ghost's true name for her own benefit. She could have hidden him. Maybe we really aren't going to keep lying to one another. Climb up the rest of the way, I tell the ghost. He does, carefully and slowly this time. A few minutes later, he's scrabbling up onto the floor. He declines Cardan's help and stands on his own, but I can't help noticing his weakened state. He looks me over as though he's noticing much the same thing. Do you need to be commanded further? I ask. Or can you give me your word you won't attack anyone in this room? He flinches. You have my word? I am sure he's not pleased that now I know his true name. Were I him, I wouldn't want me to have it either. And that's not to mention Cardan. Why don't we repair the more comfortable part of Hollow Hall to continue the discussion? Now that the dramatics are over, says the High King. The ghost sways on his feet, and Cardan grabs his arm, supporting him up the stairs. In the parlor, one of the guards brings blankets. I start building the fire. Taryn looks as though she wants to tell me to stop, but doesn't quite dare. So, I take it you were ordered to, what? Murder me if an opportunity presented itself? Cardan paces restlessly. The ghost nods, pulling the blankets closer around him. His hazel eyes are dull, and his dark blonde hair is in messy tangles. I hoped our paths wouldn't cross, and dreaded what would happen if they did. Yes, well, I suppose that we're both lucky Tarin was helpfully lurking about the palace, says Cardan. I will not go to my husband's house until I am sure Jude isn't in any danger, she says. Jude and I had a misunderstanding, Cardan says carefully, but we're not enemies, and I am not your enemy either, Tarin. You think everything's a game, she says. You and Locke. Unlike Locke, I never thought love was a game, he says. You may accuse me of much, but not that. Garrett, I interrupt in desperation, because I am not sure I want to hear more. Is there anything you can tell us? Whatever Madoc is planning, we need to know. He shakes his head. The last time I saw him, he was furious. With you, with himself, with me. Once he knew that you'd discovered I was there, He gave me my orders and sent me off, but I don't think he'd intended to send me so soon. I nod. Right, he had to move up the timetable. When I left, the sword was far from finished. That had to have been frustrating, to be forced to act before he was entirely ready. I don't believe Maddox knows I am the queen. I don't think he even knows I am alive. That's got to be worth something. If the council finds out we have Orlaf's attacker in custody, things will not get well, Cardan says with sudden decision. They will urge me to hand you over to the undersea to curry favor for Elbham. It will be only a matter of time before Nicasia knows you are in our hands. Let's take you back to the palace and put you in the bomb's custody. She can decide what to do with you. Very well, the ghost says with some combination of resignation and relief. Cardan calls for his courage again. Tarin yawns as he climbs inside, sitting next to the ghost. I lean my head against the window, only half listening as Cardan manages to persuade my sister to tell him a little bit about the mortal world. He sounds delighted at her description of slashy machines, with their violently bright colors and sugary strangeness. She's halfway through an explanation of gummy worms when we are back at the palace and climbing down from the carriage. I will escort the ghost to where he'll be residing, Cardan tells me. Jude, you ought to rest. It seems impossible that it was yesterday I woke from some drugged sleep. Yesterday the bomb took out my stitches. I walk you back to your rooms, Tarin says with something of the conspirational, leading me in the direction of the royal chamber. I go with her down the hall, two of the royal guard following us at a discreet distance. Do you trust him? She whispers when Cardan is no longer within earshot. Sometimes, I admit. She gives me a sympathetic look. He was nice in the carriage. I didn't know he knew how to be nice. That makes me laugh. At the door to my chambers, she puts her hand on my arm. He was trying to impress you, you know, talking to me. I frown. I think he just wanted to hear about weird candy. She shakes her head. He wants you to like him, but just because he wants you to doesn't mean you should. Then she leaves me to go inside the enormous royal chambers alone. I take off my dress and hang it over a screen. I borrow another of Cardan's ridiculous ruffly shirts and put it on. Then I climb into the big bed. My heart thumps nervously in my chest as I pull up to my shoulders a coverlet embroidered with a hunting stack. Our marriage is an alliance. It is a bargain. I tell myself that it doesn't have to be more than that. I try to tell myself that Cardan's desire for me has always been mixed up with disgust and that I am better off without it. I fall asleep, waiting for the sound of the door opening, for his step on the wooden floor. But when I wake, I am still alone. No lamps are lit, no pillows moved, nothing is changed. I sit upright. Perhaps he spent all the rest of the morning and afternoon in the Court of Shadows, playing darts with the ghost and checking on the roads healing, but I can more easily imagine him in the Great Hall, overseeing the last dregs of the night's revelry and swilling gallons of wine. All to avoid lying beside me